New digital scan of the Titanic has offered an unprecedented insight into the ship's final moments. A detailed three-dimensional reconstruction of the wreck reveals engineers worked to keep the lights on even as the vessel sank.
Everyone believed that the mysteries of the Titanic were all solved. But a new Titanic Discovery at 12,000 feet changes everything we thought we knew. With the latest cutting-edge 3D scanning and modeling technology, scientists have created a one-to-one digital copy of the entire wreck. And turns out, we got a lot of things wrong. What this scan reveals has the potential to change history. Not only has this digital copy busted several Titanic myths, but it has solved age-old questions about the unsinkable that had the experts baffled. Let's find out how. The scans in detail. The Titanic has been a keeper of secrets ever since it sank to the bottom of the sea. For a long time, people didn't even know that it had split apart until Jean-Louis Michel and Robert Ballard explored its wreck for the first time in 1985. Technology has advanced significantly since then, and with cutting-edge technology, scientists did what no one thought would be possible. They created an exact digital replica of the Titanic. Every detail is the same. Every dent, gash, and bent piece matches the original. They didn't even miss the smallest pieces of debris. But how? How did they manage to create such a perfect replica? The answer is incredibly interesting. Scientists used a specialized ship and several remotely controlled submersibles. Each submersible was equipped with the latest deep-sea mapping technology, capable of conducting extremely accurate scans. The task ahead was a perilous one. The extreme depth of the wreck, combined with the fact that the submersibles weren't allowed to touch the wreck itself, made it extremely difficult to navigate the darkness of the ocean. Not to mention, they had to cover a very large area. Not many people know this, but the stern and the bow of the Titanic are resting nearly 2,600 feet apart, with a whole field of debris in between. All of it had to be mapped carefully and in detail. Every piece of metal, every debris, and even the terrain. A formidable task for certain. But with patience and endurance, the experts managed to pull it off. The submersibles worked for 200 hours, snapping 715,000 images and 4K video footage. In total, they collected 16 terabytes of data. And then came the time to put together all that information. What they made was marvelous. An exact copy of the wreck site, so detailed that it showed each individual rivet and bend with clarity. You can even see the serial number on one of the propellers. That's how detailed the 3D model is. And what did they gain from it? A treasure trove of information. The scientists found out how the ship had far more flooded compartments than experts believed. How the split down the middle was much more explosive than we previously thought. Most importantly, these scans cleared the name of one of the most controversial figures on the Titanic, First Officer Murdoch. And that is only scratching the surface. But first, let's talk about the most heartbreaking find in the compartments of the once mighty ship. The heroes that stayed. Everyone praises the Titanic crew for being heroic in the face of disaster. But even among heroes, there are legends. And the scans of the Titanic revealed who these legends were on that fateful night that the Titanic sank. The discovery came in a rather inconspicuous way. The first hint was in the engine room. The valves and the pressure release mechanisms were not closed. They were open. And in the boiler rooms, the scans showed the second clue. It was the boilers of the Titanic. They were buckled. These massive furnaces housed extreme temperatures to keep the ship's lifeblood running. So, how could they be in such a condition? To the layman, these signs may not make any sense, but to the experts who understood the functions of these components, these boilers, valves, and pressure release mechanisms told a tale of sacrifice and bravery like no other. You see, the reason why the boilers were in such a condition was that they were under extreme pressure right to the very end of the Titanic. Up until it sank, those boilers were running. This could only mean one thing. The engineers who were keeping these boilers running never left their posts. They fulfilled their duty to the very end, not because they couldn't leave, but rather because they wanted to. Their job was essential. After all, it was these very same boilers that were ultimately powering all the lights aboard the Titanic. Without them, the whole ship would have plunged into darkness. And that would have meant an even bigger disaster. It was only because the lights stayed on that most of the survivors were able to escape the ship on lifeboats. Had the engineers left, had they valued their lives above that of the passengers, those lights would have gone out. The results would have been catastrophic. Who knows how many more souls would have perished aboard the Titanic had it not been for the brave sacrifice of these engineers? They kept on working, keeping the lights on in the entire ship, even as the ship took on water, as it tilted upwards and ultimately snapped into two halves. They didn't leave even as the ship began sinking. The amount of heart and bravery that would have required is mind-boggling. What the scans were showing corroborated with the first-hand accounts of the survivors, who stated that even as the ship was snapping in half, they could see the lights shining bright on the Titanic. Not by some automatic generator like we have today, but by the brave men who had put their lives on the line for the safety of the passengers. And that sacrifice would have gone unappreciated, ignored as a fantastical claim by historians, had it not been for these scans. The boiler rooms of the Titanic tell the stories of the brave acts committed inside them, even as the entire ship rusts away. They are a testament to the fact that bravery in the face of peril never goes forgotten. Even if the world ignored their valiant efforts, the very metal and bolts of the Titanic remembered it for them. While these scans did bring the sacrifice of Titanic's engineers to light, they have also cleared up one of the biggest controversies of the Titanic. First Officer Murdoch. William McMaster Murdoch is one of the most controversial figures in Titanic's history. As a first officer of the Titanic, one of his duties was to ensure the safety and well-being of the passengers. But many believe that not only did he shun these duties, but he also did something horrifying. When all hope was lost, he used his gun first on the passengers, then on himself. Even in the movie Titanic by James Cameron, he is depicted committing this atrocity. But is that really true? Do the latest scans of the Titanic corroborate that account? Turns out, they do not. The scans paint a completely different picture. They not only cleared his name, but also demonstrated that the man everyone thought was a villain was actually a hero to the very end. When the experts reviewed the digital twin of the Titanic, they discovered an anomaly. One of the lifeboat davits on the side of the ship was still in launch position. How does that exonerate Murdoch of the allegations? Well, some of the witness accounts from survivors of the Titanic disaster tell a different tale of Murdoch, a tale of sacrifice and heroism. They say that Murdoch died saving lives. He was helping the passengers escape by launching the boats one after the other. And he was doing just that when a massive wave crashed against the ship as it sank, sweeping Murdoch off the boat, never to be seen again. The last moments of Murdoch's life were spent trying to save the passengers, and the lifeboat David, being still in launch position, confirms that version of events. It could only have been in that specific position if the witness accounts were true. Murdoch was halfway through launching that very same lifeboat using the crane when the wave hit, taking him with it. A heroic sacrifice, no less important than the engineers and the other crew on the Titanic, who gave up their lives trying to save the passengers aboard. Murdoch not only did his duty, but he went above and beyond. And the stain on his name, claiming he committed horrifying acts in his last moments, was proven to be nothing but fiction. How these scans cleared up one of the most enduring controversies of Titanic's history is impressive as much as it is admirable. However, this next discovery was even more unexpected than what we have discovered so far, because it challenged everything we thought we knew about the Titanic's fall. The inevitable flooding. For the longest time, experts were confident that the sinking of the Titanic was caused by the flooding of 4 sealed compartments in the hull. However, recent scans have painted a very different picture, one that has shocked the experts. In total, the Titanic contained 16 compartments. Of those 16, it was built to survive the flooding of a maximum of 4 compartments in its hull. As I mentioned earlier, a long-standing theory holds that 4 compartments flooded, resulting in the ship's sinking. But the recent scans have revealed something completely different. The damage from the iceberg extended to not 4, but 6 compartments. The holes extended much farther down the hull than we expected. That resulted in 5 of the compartments being completely flooded, while the 6th one was only partially flooded before the ship sank. And this is actually more in line with what the survivors from the Titanic have been saying for ages. Their claim has been that the ship sank very fast. With 6 compartments taking in water rather than 4, the Titanic would not have stayed afloat for as long as the experts previously believed. However, that is not the only thing the scans revealed. They made another interesting revelation. In the scans, experts were able to see the tears in the hull more clearly. And sure enough, there was something strange about them. They were too small. It has been a long-held belief that the Titanic's hull was torn open wide on the side by the iceberg hit. But the scans made things clear. The holes in the hull were small, smaller than an A4-sized paper sheet in most cases. So, how did the ship sink if the holes were too small to let a significant amount of water in? The answer lay once again in the scans. It was the rivets and seams of the hull's thick metal that were the culprit. Those rivets had popped, and the seams sprang open, letting in a torrent of water. The hit from the iceberg tore these seams open like cloth, causing the catastrophe to unfold. Those movies, those paintings, those retellings, all got it wrong. The Titanic hull wasn't severely breached. It was forced open like opening a bag of chips. But we all know that was only the beginning of the disaster. As the movies show, the true destruction came later when the Titanic broke apart, clean down the middle. Or did it? The digital twin of the Titanic, made using the most detailed scans yet, tells a different story. The break that separated the aft and bow of the ship was not nearly as clean as the experts had thought it to be for decades. A violent break. When the experts examined the 3-dimensional scans closely, they made a startling discovery. The tear that broke apart the Titanic was completely different from the story we have been told for nearly 100 years. The experts had no idea. When experts and artists alike envision the Titanic breaking into 2 parts, they imagine it as a clean break down the middle, but the scans show something else. The metal plates around the breaking point on both the stern and the bow of the ship were twisted to the extreme, almost as if they had exploded apart rather than getting split. This was not in line with the narrative we have been told. The epic split shown in the movies and artistic depictions doesn't even come close to the true horror. The split had been so violent and destructive that the deck plates got folded in on themselves as if made of nothing but paper. Here is why that is insane. The deck plates on ships like the Titanic are very strong, so those getting folded on themselves would have required an explosive amount of force. As the water level rose inside the ship, flooding the watertight compartments one after another, the other end of the ship began to lift. According to the most recent estimates based on these scans, the ship tilted upwards at a 30-degree angle before snapping. The buoyancy imbalance, combined with the ship's weight, created a shattering crash. But it wasn't quick. It was a long, drawn-out, and incredibly destructive event. So much so that the staircases in the cabins of the Titanic collapsed on top of themselves. The internal walls buckled inward, resulting in extensive structural damage. And then, when the ship broke into 2 pieces, what happened next? Well, the scans show that the bow and the stern both met a different fate. The bow drifted down, relatively intact, coming to rest on the ocean floor. Even today, it has held its shape well. The stern wasn't as lucky, though. You see, this part of the ship met the worst fate. The scans reveal a pile of metal and components, bent and distorted to such an extent that the entire stern resembles a heap of scrap metal. But why so much damage to this particular part? Using the scans, the scientists were able to come up with the answer. On its way down, the stern had air pockets trapped within it, and as it sank, the air leaked out, creating torque. The whole stern was spinning at an angle, moving quickly toward the sea floor. Such a huge thing coming crashing down while spinning meant there was a lot more force involved here. As the stern hit the seafloor, the momentum from the spin caused it to break apart completely. It exploded like a balloon swung down on the concrete. The scans show how the metal bars bent and collapsed, how the deck came crashing down into the sections underneath, causing destruction like nothing else. These scans had revealed something horrifying. The Titanic's fate had been far more violent than we previously imagined. The metal beast had fallen not with a thud, but with an explosive crash that shook the earth. By this point, the experts must have been hoping this was all they had gotten wrong about the Titanic up until now. But with this digital twin, the Pandora box had been opened, and the next discovery also came as a shock to everyone. Upgraded davits. Ever since it sank, the Titanic has been subject to harsh criticism for its design. Even though the ship featured many advanced safety systems that are still used today, such as watertight compartments and remotely activated watertight doors, there is one significant flaw that is pointed out about the ship's design: the lack of enough lifeboats. The Titanic only held 20 lifeboats, certainly not enough for the 2,224 passengers and crew aboard. Why was this oversight made, and who was to blame? The public and media blamed the engineers. They said the ones who designed the ship failed to put in enough lifeboats. But what if I told you it wasn't their fault at all? The 3D scans showed that the Titanic was actually designed to be capable of carrying sufficient lifeboats for all its passengers. In the scans, the experts noticed that the lifeboat davits on the ships had been upgraded before the doomed voyage. Combined, they could have held a total of 48 boats, more than enough. But the extra boats were never added. Why? The experts believe it was because of a decision by the White Star Line, the company in charge of the Titanic. They did not want a cluttered deck, so they removed much of the critical safety feature, leaving behind only 20 lifeboats for the entire ship. It's difficult to tell how many of the 1,500 casualties in the Titanic's disaster were because of this one decision by the bureaucracy of the White Star Line. But it is safe to say most of those people could have survived had that aesthetic choice not been made. It was never the fault of the engineers. They designed enough cranes, but the company simply never used them. And the upgraded lifeboat davits showing up in the scan is solid proof of that. Maronei radio room. While the experts were going through the scans in detail, they were not expecting to come across this next find. Judging by how long the Titanic has been underwater and the kind of damage it suffered during its fall to the ocean floor, you wouldn't expect any of its inner cabins to have survived, right? I mean, most of them got crushed like a pancake under the inertia and weight of the entire ship above them. Only a few survived meeting that fate, and all of them were just unimportant ones, or so we thought. The latest scans have unearthed a compartment inside the Titanic that is in much better condition than previously thought. And this compartment housed one of the most important components of the entire ship. Located on the boat deck between the grand staircase and the bridge was the Maronei room. The purpose of this room was critical to Titanic's functionality. The Maronei room was used to send and receive messages to and from the Titanic. And yes, that included the final calls for help the ship made before it sank. These SOS signals were vital in saving the lives of the passengers. While no ship could make it in time before the ship sank, the signals did alert RMS Carpathia, which came and saved the survivors, preventing the waves from taking them. The Maronei room's skeletal structure still remains down in the wreck. While most of the equipment is lost to rust and decay, some of it still remains. The traces of coiled cables, the shells of some of the equipment, still lying there, unseen for ages. But who was manning this equipment when the Titanic sank? Two men, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride. Both Jack and Harold stayed in the Maronei room, sending SOS signals until their very last moments. That makes the Maronei room not just a relic of a lost past, but also a gravesite of two heroes. The scans reveal that the Maronei room still retains much of its original contents, or at least what's left of them. The wiring plans, the equipment layout, and the structural integrity of the Maronei rooms are all as expected. Access inside, however, may or may not be possible. There is talk of recovering the Maronei equipment inside this section of the ship. However, debates over its ethics have halted progress. The argument is that, is it really worth retrieving the historically valuable equipment if it means damaging the graves of so many heroes? What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Meanwhile, let's talk about the next discovery the experts made while reviewing the Titanic's scan. They were not ready for what they found. The grave markers. As I mentioned earlier, the Titanic's split was not a clean one. It was messy. So messy that tons of debris splintered off both parts of the Titanic as it fell down to the ocean floor, creating a debris field spanning nearly 1.5 miles. The experts scanned almost all of it when creating Titanic's digital twin. While it was a tedious task, it did reveal some interesting insights. Near the officers' quarters, they found a metal locker containing a note. The note told of how the lights dimmed and the ship broke apart as it sank, how the crew stayed at their posts, in the engine rooms, on the deck, in the Maronei room, and most importantly, in the boiler compartments. It was a message showing the lost hope and tragedy that unfolded that night. But that wasn't even the most haunting sight among Titanic's debris. The scans showed something much more heartbreaking. Shoes, scattered all around the Titanic's remains, sitting empty and untouched for nearly 100 years. Why are these important? Well, when the Titanic went down, many of the unfortunate souls aboard perished. Many of them sank down to the ocean floor alongside the Titanic. Over time, the bodies have eroded away, including the bones. What they have left behind are just the shoes. The last marks showed where the dead came to rest once the disaster was over. They are like grave markers, each one telling a tragic story that ended abruptly and violently in the cold depths of the ocean. But these boots and shoes weren't the only remnants. The scans also identified where each personal belonging of the passengers and the crew fell. A pocket watch, trunks filled with luggage, jewelry, postcards, perfume bottles, eyeglasses, and most morbid of all, children's toys. This debris featured in the scans is a look back in time. They belonged to someone who had dreams and aspirations, yet many of them never made it off the Titanic, meeting dreadful ends. A pure revolution. The scans of the Titanic, conducted with so much effort, have yielded unmatched results. They have completed many half-finished tales. They have solved mysteries and unearthed new ones. They have even exonerated controversial figures and answered many of the questions that still lingered around about the Titanic. But is it all over? Certainly not. The Titanic holds many, many more mysteries. We have only just begun to scratch the surface. And these scans will be vital in uncovering more of the truth. And certainly, they hold an unmatched advantage over other means of exploration of the Titanic's wreck. You see, the wreck site is not as sturdy as it used to be. Exploration missions and tourism by the rich people in submarines have caused severe damage to the wreck. Metal-eating bacteria have been introduced to several sections because of these unnecessary dives, causing the structure to weaken. It was to solve this very problem that experts decided to create a digital twin of the Titanic. It prevents the need for other exploration missions. That way, no more damage can be done to the Titanic's wreck than we already have. And then there is the ethics of visiting the Titanic. After all, the wreck site is also a graveyard at sea. Why should people be allowed to go sightseeing there? It is a place of tragedy. The 3D scans provide a more ethical way of seeing the Titanic's wreck, to learn from it, and to explore its mysteries. This way, no resting places will be disturbed and no lasting memory will be crushed by the bulky equipment. And scientists are expected to put these scans to good use. The data from the scan is being fed to AI, so the AI can see patterns we humans would have missed. It will be used to reconstruct the timeline of the Titanic's disaster in extreme detail. The AI will map out possible crew movement at the time of the disaster, detailing how each person aboard would have acted. And from that, who knows how many more mysteries will be solved and how many truths will be uncovered. Scientists aren't limiting this tech to the Titanic either. They are expected to create digital twins of other important wrecks buried in the ocean depths, like the Endurance and World War II wreck sites across the coasts of the world. This tech is also expected to be used to map out the submerged cities of the Mediterranean. Needless to say, there are a lot of unexpected finds that we're about to see coming out of these projects in the near future, all thanks to the latest digital scanning and digital twins technology that the experts have come up with. The Titanic is only just the beginning. Are you excited for what's to come? Let me know in the comments down below. I would love to read them all. And while you are at it, be sure to like the video, share it, and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, goodbye and stay curious.